Welcome. Today I'm going to, as simply as I can, try to explain how to make recordings for ACX, which is an audiobook exchange from Amazon. ACX does have several limitations on what you can submit based on their requirements for quality. So today I'm going to start by showing you how to get a recorder that is capable of meeting those limits. Your equipment is going to matter, so I do suggest you get the best microphone that you can afford for your projects. I personally am using a Shure handheld microphone and a USB adapter cord that connects to the XLR port on that microphone. Other than my computer, that's pretty much all I need, except for software to record. For that, I'm recommending Audacity. It is a free audio program, and it has been around for many years. They've pretty much got it down to a science at this point, and it is one of the best free options available. For that, you will go to audacityteam.org/download. You'll select your computer of choice. In my case, I'm working with Windows. They give the option of downloading via MuseHub. For beginners, I wouldn't recommend this option. Simply choose the download and save to your computer. Now, that is not all you will need, because, as I said, ACX has many requirements for quality. In order to check whether you have met those quality requirements, you're going to need what's known as a plugin for the program, and that plugin is the ACX Check plugin. The ACX Check plugin can be found at plugins.audacityteam.org/analyzers/analysis-plugins. Scroll down a little ways on the page, and you'll see individual analyzers and the one you want, ACX Check. You'll see that's acx-check.ny because this is a Nyquist install, and you'll see how that works in just a moment. Simply download that. And then you'll go through a fairly simple process of installing Audacity from the Audacity installer. Don't touch the acx-check.ny file until you have completed the install of Audacity. It's straightforward. If you have installed a program before, you probably will have no problem with this one. Please note, it may make offers of optional things while it's installing. You can select not to get those items, and I recommend you do so. Once you've installed and opened Audacity, you'll find a screen that looks very much like this. You will want the ACX Check tool to show up in the menu as it does on mine. And the way to do that is you go to Tools, Nyquist Plugin Installer, and you select the acx-check.ny install that you downloaded before. I'm not going to overwrite my previous installation at this time, but you simply hit Apply, and it will then give you the option under Analyze of ACX Check. Next, before you start recording, you'll want to make sure a few settings are correct. Primarily, though it seems counterintuitive to some, ACX does prefer mono recordings over stereo. In order to achieve this, go to Edit and Preferences, and you'll see that your playback and recording devices will depend on your system, but you want to select mono, one channel, instead of stereo, two channels. Your quality should also be set to 44100 Hertz, which is the same for your default sample rate. This default sample rate format, 32-bit float, latency, buffer length, 100 milliseconds, latency compensation, negative 130 milliseconds. Now that you've done that, go to Audio Setup and make sure that your recording device is selected as you would like. In this case, I'm using a Shure microphone that is plugged in through an XLR adapter to USB. I recommend this setup as it is fairly inexpensive and gives a very good quality sound. Once you're sure you have the correct input, simply hit the record button and begin speaking. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. This will give you a simple recording. Of course, normally it would be longer, but this is just for example. Now that we've got a recording, I recommend to immediately save your project. You should save your project many times as you work on it, just as with anything that you've done with computers in the past. You will notice that I'm saving a project, not an audio file at this point. So I go into File, Save Project. It will ask for a name. I'm simply naming this one Sample and putting it in my current project folder. And now that's done. As I said, this is not an audio file. You would not be able to play it with a standard media player. This saves all of the information about the work that you've done on the project. In order to make an audio file, you would use the export audio function, which you will see later. Now you have your recording. Select the portion of your recording that you would like to make sure passes the requirements of ACX. Go to Analyze and select the ACX check tool. You'll see in this case, it did not pass all of the three things that this tool checks for. It's too low audio. It's too quiet. But it did pass the noise floor, which is the amount of background noise in the file. We're going to work on each of these individually, including the last one, because as we work on the first two, usually the last one changes, and it may not pass at that point. The first one we're going to work on is the RMS level. You can see here it failed and is required to be in the range of -23 to -18 dB. In order to fix that, we go to Effect, Volume and Compression, Loudness Normalization. And since it falls between the two values given, I usually go with negative 20.0. You also want to normalize to RMS, not perceived loudness in this case. Hit apply, and you can see that the audio jumps dramatically. Now at this point, we will do another ACX check, and you'll see that the RMS level is at 20, just as we set it. But the peaks are still too high, and it has affected the noise floor considerably. Next, we're going to work on the peak level. As it says here, peaks must be no higher than minus 3 dB. For this, go to Effect, Volume and Compression again, Limiter. I generally choose a setting of negative 3.5 for both threshold and makeup target. Here you can see that knee width is set to 2.0. Under smoothing, look ahead is 1.0 and release 20.0. Once you have set these values, usually you will not have to set them again, but it is important to check that they are correct each time you are working on a project. Now I will hit apply, and you'll notice that the peaks of the loudest moments in my recording get adjusted off. The sound is virtually identical. Once again, I'd like to show you the ACX check tool. That's Analyze ACX Check. And you'll see that the noise floor has dropped out considerably and is way too high, too noisy for the requirements of ACX. It's important at this point to note these numbers. The noise floor must be below negative 60 dB. That's the requirement. It's currently at negative 46.42. Now you can fairly well fine-tune this exactly where you want it. My target, in order to maintain the requirements, even if I do a little bit of changes after I've finished, is to make it negative 70. And you can see here, the RMS level and the peak level have already changed slightly from the fixes that I applied. So it is important that you don't go too exact with the limits that are given. In order to fix the noise floor, you note negative 46.42, or whatever the number is in your case, and you do some basic subtraction. I want to adjust this by 14 approximately. I can be very exacting and say that it is 13.58, but I'm going to go with 14 in order to reach their level. But to reach my preferences, I'm going to go a little bit further and say 24. Now let me show you where you enter that information. Go to Effect, Noise Removal, and Repair. You want the noise gate. Now first, I'm going to put my noise reduction amount right here. Again, I'm choosing to do 24. It doesn't have to be exact, so long as it meets the limitations. But here you'll see Select Function. You want to analyze first. And when you analyze, you can hit apply, but that will make this entire dialog go away. Instead, hit Preview. Preview shows that the suggested threshold setting is negative 25 dB. And that you enter on the first line here. Now, sometimes it will give you a number that is incredibly low, like 3. In those cases, usually you pretty much have to make up an amount. I usually go with 35 to 40 in order to make this work. It's complicated to explain why that works, and sometimes I don't think I understand it myself, but typically it does work. Now, having entered these two values, you will go back to select function and hit gate, and this time instead of hitting preview, you will hit apply. Now, if you go to the ACX check, you will see that it has adjusted almost exactly, since I didn't enter an exact value, so that it is at 69.66. I was targeting at 70, and so that for me is perfect, but of course the limit is 60, negative 60 dB in order to pass. So anything past that will be fine, and you can fine-tune it using that tool. So now you have a file that has passed the ACX check. Of course, at this point, it isn't an audio file that can be used by most people. It's still simply a project file. In order to make it usable for other people, you will want to go to File and Export Audio. You can see that it has already applied the project name to the MP3. If it is not an MP3, in order to be ACX compliant, you need to select the MP3 file format. Your sample rate, as I said before, should be 44100 Hertz. Under channels, it should say mono, not stereo or custom mapping. Bitrate mode should be constant. The quality should be 192 kbps. You want this to export the entire project, and before you do that, you also want to click in to the metadata. The metadata is how each file is identified in order to be displayed in media players. You can see here it has several categories. Artist name will be the author of the book. Track title will be the chapter number, or if the author prefers, the chapter name. Album title will be the title of the book. Track number will depend partly on what goes before the chapters. For instance, if you have chapter 1, but you also had a legal introduction first and a preface, then that would make chapter 1 track number 3. The year is simply the publication date of the book. The genre, of course, is determined by the book. And in comments, I do recommend you put read by and your own name so that you get credit on the track. Once you've entered that information, Once you've entered that information, you can save a template of that information so that if you're doing multiple chapters or tracks for the book, you can load that information later and only change the appropriate parts, such as chapter name or track number. Now that we have that information, and presumably if it were a real audiobook, it would have all that metadata, you would click Export after verifying that you know where the file is going. In this case, once again, I'm putting it in my current project folder. Now I hit Export. And you will see in my current project folders, I have sample.mp3 along with all the files that I have made in order to make this tutorial. Thank you for listening today, and I hope that this has helped you learn more about how to make your files ACX compliant, and I wish you very well in your journey making audiobooks. Thank you. But wait, there is one last thing. Always remember to save your project when you're done. Thank you.